You were never meant to be our son. You were never supposed to find this letter. If you're reading it, then I'm already dead. And the truth you're about to uncover will hurt far more than my absence ever could."
Michael Granger had always believed in the story of his life. Firmly, unquestioningly, like someone believes in gravity. There was a beginning, a middle, and as of 3 days ago, an end. His mother, Linda, had died of pancreatic cancer at 65. The funeral was quiet. The grief was expected. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared him for the letter. He found it while cleaning out her room. It was behind a photo frame, not hidden so much as placed, like it was waiting for him. A folded cream envelope with his name on it in her familiar handwriting. Just Michael. No date, no return address. Just a weight of silence and something unspoken. Inside, only 4 sentences. "You were never meant to be our son. You were never supposed to find this letter. If you're reading it, then I'm already dead. And the truth you're about to uncover will hurt far more than my absence ever could. No love, Mom. No explanation. No comfort." He sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the letter while the late March rain tapped gently against the windows. The air smelled faintly of lavender and cough drops. Her coat still hung on the door. Her slippers were neatly aligned by the bed, as though she might walk back in at any moment. But this letter had rewritten everything. Michael folded it again with numb fingers and stared at nothing for a long while. At first, he tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was medication. Maybe she had written it in confusion toward the end, when her mind had started to slip. But the clarity in her handwriting told him otherwise. These were not the words of a confused woman. They were deliberate, controlled, final. He opened her closet and pulled out the same shoebox he'd seen 100 times before, the one labeled private. She had always told him it was full of old recipes and greeting cards. As a child, he believed her. As a teenager, he never thought to look. But now, with the letter in his hand, the shoebox felt radioactive. Inside were documents, loose photographs, a plastic hospital bracelet, and a single Polaroid of a woman he recognized, his mother, maybe 30 years ago, holding a boy who looked uncannily like him. The child wasn't smiling. His face was blank, almost confused, and his arms hung stiffly at his sides. Michael flipped the photo over. Nothing was written on the back. Then he looked at the bracelet. The name on it was faint, but still legible. James Taylor, DOB, August 17th, 88, Oregon Child Services. His hands trembled as he picked up a folded newspaper clipping from the bottom of the box. Oregon toddler missing, suspected abduction, August 1990. Michael read the short article twice. It described a boy named James Taylor, age 2, who had disappeared from a foster care facility just outside Portland. The case was still open. The boy was never found. No arrests were ever made. The year matched. The age matched. The photo matched. He felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. Michael stumbled back onto the bed, paper still in his hands, and tried to breathe. The entire house felt like it had shifted, like the walls were tilted just slightly off axis. The childhood he thought he had, the birthday parties, the Christmas mornings, the bedtime stories, all of it might have been built on a lie. Was he James Taylor? Was he that missing child? And what did Linda mean when she said he was never meant to be their son? The next morning, Michael didn't go to work. He didn't return calls or check email. He sat at the kitchen table with a mug of cold coffee and stared out the window as the rain refused to stop. He remembered being 5 years old and asking his mother why there were no baby pictures of him. She'd smiled and said, "We lost the photo albums in a basement flood before we moved here." He remembered believing her. He remembered asking once about his birth certificate for a school trip to Canada. His father had said, "We'll take care of it," and handed him a passport 2 weeks later. He remembered his third birthday more vividly than any memory before it. The cake, the clown, a green sweater that was too big. But nothing before that. No memory of crawling, of baby food, of lullabies. He always thought that was normal. That afternoon, he took the shoebox to the attic and spent 3 hours going through every inch of it inside a manila envelope. He found an Oregon address handwritten and faded, and next to it, a name, Margaret Lewis. He found her in less than 5 minutes online. Retired nurse, still living in Oregon, no listed family. He called her number with hands still shaking. The phone rang 5 times before a voice answered, old, weary, but sharp. Hello? Hi, this might sound strange, but my name is Michael Granger. I think you might have known my mother, Linda Granger. There was a pause. Linda, the voice repeated slowly. Yes, I knew Linda. Not recently, but a long time ago. Michael's voice cracked. Did she ever bring a child with her? Another long pause. Then, she didn't bring one. She left with one. Michael drove to Oregon the next day. The woman who opened the door was in her late 70s, wearing thick glasses and a cardigan buttoned to her chin. Her house smelled of camphor and mint. She looked at him for a long moment before saying, "My God, you're him." He sat down on her couch and tried to steady his voice. "I need to know everything." Margaret took a long sip of tea and leaned back into the cushions. "Your mother, Linda, was desperate. I met her at a shelter clinic. She'd been told she could never have children. But one day, she told me someone had offered her away. She didn't explain much, but she was scared. Said it wasn't through any agency. Said it had to stay quiet." Michael stared at the floor. "What about my real parents?" Margaret hesitated. "Your biological mother was struggling. Drugs. In and out of jail. You were placed in state care. But not long after, you were gone." "So she bought me?" Michael asked. "No," Margaret said. "She took you to protect you. At least, that's what you believed." Michael was silent for a long time. Then he whispered, "From what?" Margaret's eyes narrowed. "From something worse. From the people who were planning to sell you." That night, back in Seattle, Michael walked into the kitchen where his father sat alone with a bottle of bourbon and 2 glasses. "You found it," Richard said without looking up. Michael nodded. "The letter, the photos, the article." Richard poured them both a drink. "I told her not to leave that letter. Told her it would only hurt you." Michael's voice cracked. "She wasn't my mother?" Richard looked at him, eyes glassy and sunken. "She became your mother. That's what matters." "Was I kidnapped?" "No," Richard said quietly. "You were saved." Michael stared at him. "We didn't know everything at first," Richard said. "She brought you home, said no one was looking for you. But then we got a call, anonymous. A man said you were part of a deal, that someone wanted you back." "What kind of deal?" "Child trafficking," Richard said. "He said you weren't meant to go to a family. You were going to be sold." Michael felt sick. "We tracked him down," Richard continued. "Your mother called in a favor, a cousin in law enforcement. They busted the whole ring, but it never made the papers. No one wanted the headlines. We were told to keep quiet, and we did." Michael gripped the edge of the table. Everything he knew had collapsed in 48 hours, but something else had taken root in the rubble. The smallest seed of truth, and for the first time, he wasn't sure if he hated it or needed more of it. Michael didn't return home for 3 days after confronting his father. He stayed in a motel on the edge of town, staring at water-stained ceilings and trying to piece together who he was. Sleep came in fits. The letter, the photo, the man in prison. Each detail gnawed at the corners of his sanity, a slow, constant unraveling. His name was Michael Granger, but he now knew that wasn't the name he was born with, and maybe not the life he was meant to live. On the fourth morning, he drove to the King County Archives and filed a formal request for all available documents under the name James Taylor. Born in Oregon in 1988, a clerk named Beth, who looked like she'd worked there forever, gave him a look of cautious interest when she handed over a stack of redacted adoption reports. "If there's something here," she said, "it'll be buried under layers of silence." Michael nodded, too numb to feel hope. He sat down at a long wooden table and began reading through the brittle pages one by one. What he found confirmed what Arthur Nolan had told him. There were at least 3 separate investigations between 1990 and 1992 into what officials labeled unlicensed adoptions involving shelters and foster care centers across Oregon. In 2 of the reports, the initials JT appeared next to the words "missing child, case unresolved." One of the memos stated, "Subject believed to be transferred through private arrangement, location unknown." Michael closed the folder and stared out the window. He was a subject. He had been moved like cargo. He didn't call Richard. He didn't even want to hear his voice. The man who'd raised him had become part of the puzzle. He didn't know how to finish. Familiar but false. Comforting yet corrupt. He didn't know what was worse. That Richard had knowingly paid for him, or that he might have convinced himself it wasn't wrong. The silence between them now felt wider than any lie. Desperate for clarity, Michael reached out to Diana Levin, the journalist who had written the original story on the missing boy in 1990. She was retired, but her email still worked, and she replied within hours. They met at a small cafe just outside downtown. She was sharp-eyed, soft-spoken, and greeted him like she'd been waiting for decades. "When I saw your name," she said, "I knew it had to be you. No one else would ask the right question." Michael handed her the letter. She read it silently, then folded it and placed it on the table. "Do you want to find her?" she asked. "Your biological mother?" Michael didn't answer right away. He just looked at her, then down at his coffee. "I don't know. I want to know what she was like. I want to know if she looked for me. I want to know if I was loved." Diana nodded slowly. "I know someone who might be able to help. Detective Clay Hammond. He worked that case harder than anyone. Even after they shut it down, he kept copies of everything." She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded note with a name and number. "He's in Oregon, retired now, but he'll talk to you." Michael met Clay Hammond 2 days later at a small sheriff's station in Portland that had been turned into a storage unit for cold cases. Clay was in his 60s, built like a retired boxer, with a limp and a voice like sandpaper. He didn't shake hands. He hugged Michael the second he walked in. 35 years, he said, "and you're the first one to come back." Michael showed him the photo, the bracelet, and the records. Clay took them all in without blinking. "Your name was James Taylor," he said. "Your mother was Evelyn. She was 20 when you were born. She fought to keep you, fought harder to get you back." They sat down in a back room filled with yellowed folders and stacked evidence boxes. Clay pulled out one marked Taylor J. and laid it open on the table. Inside were missing persons reports, interview transcripts, and 2 photos. One showed Evelyn holding a baby in front of a rundown apartment building. The other was a copy of the same missing flyer Michael had found in the archive. Clay tapped his finger on the report. She entered rehab in 1989, got clean, got out, walked into DHS, and demanded to know where her son was. They told her he'd been transferred temporarily. By the time they admitted he was gone, so was she. Michael felt something shift in his chest, a grief he didn't know how to name. "Did she give up?" he asked. Clay shook his head. "No, she went underground, changed her name, moved east, maybe Pennsylvania. We think she joined a religious recovery program. She kept searching until she couldn't." "Now," Michael asked, "is she still alive?" Clay looked at him sadly. "We don't know. We never found a body, but we never found a trace of her again, either. She just disappeared." Michael left the station with a folder in his bag and a weight in his chest. On the flight home, he looked at Evelyn's photo 100 times, memorizing every line of her face, the way she held him like something precious. He tried to imagine her voice, her laugh, the way she might have said his name. He didn't even know what she called him. Jamie? James? Baby? It didn't matter. She had wanted him. That was enough to change everything. Back in Seattle, Richard was waiting on the front porch when Michael arrived. He didn't speak until Michael reached the steps. "I thought I'd lost you for good," Richard said quietly. Michael didn't sit. "You did." Richard stood, his voice shaking. "Please, just talk to me." Michael crossed his arms. "Did you know she was looking for me? That she tried to get me back?" Richard nodded slowly. "We heard rumors. Nolan told us someone was asking around. Your mother panicked. She said we had to move before someone came knocking." Michael stared at him. "So you ran?" "We tried to protect you," Richard said. "We didn't want you taken away." "You already took me," Michael snapped. "You don't get to pretend you were protecting me from someone else." Richard's shoulders sagged. "She didn't have a stable life. We told ourselves you'd be better off. We loved you. You loved the idea of me," Michael said. "Not the real me. Not the boy who was missing. Not the son of a woman you were trying to erase." The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Richard finally said, "What do you want from me?" Michael looked at him for a long time. "I don't know. Maybe just the truth. Maybe for you to say you're sorry, not for what happened, but for never telling me." Richard's eyes brimmed with tears. "I am sorry. I've been sorry every day. If I had to do it again, knowing what I know now, I don't know that I wouldn't still choose you." Michael didn't respond. He turned and walked into the house, unsure whether he would stay. In the weeks that followed, Michael began working with Clay and Diana to track Evelyn's possible locations. They combed through church records, rehab program archives, and small-town voter registries across Pennsylvania and Ohio. In a 1998 intake form from a women's shelter in Scranton, they found someone named Eve Carson. She had no ID, no relatives listed, but she had checked a box that said, "Searching for child, age unknown, possibly adopted." That was enough. Michael flew to Scranton the following week. The shelter was still standing, run by the same outreach director who had been there in the 90s. Her name was Miriam, and when Michael introduced himself and said Eve Carson, she covered her mouth with one hand and whispered, "You're her boy." He felt like the floor had tilted under him. "She talked about me?" he asked. Miriam nodded. "Every day. She kept a notebook, said she'd find you or die trying." Miriam brought out a cardboard box from the back room. Inside were 3 worn journals, filled with letters addressed to Jamie. Michael sat in the common room and read through every page. His birth mother had written to him every year on his birthday, every Christmas, every random Wednesday when the pain was too much. She told him he was brave, that he was loved, that she would never stop searching. She died in 2018 of pancreatic cancer, same as Linda, same as the woman who raised him. Michael wept for hours in that shelter. He wasn't just mourning Evelyn. He was mourning Linda again, because now he understood. He had lost both of them, one to lies and one to absence. One had raised him, and one had remembered him, and now he belonged in neither. He flew home with the journals in his backpack, heavier than anything he'd ever carried. Eichel returned to Seattle with a box of Evelyn's journals and the weight of 2 names on his shoulders, James Taylor and Michael Granger. He couldn't be both anymore. And maybe he was neither. The man he was becoming didn't belong to either life, but was shaped by the lies and losses of both. He stayed off the grid, renting a basement studio through a friend and avoiding Richard entirely. He didn't answer Maya's text for a few days, not because he was avoiding her, but because he needed to breathe in silence. Her existence, her survival, had cracked open a part of him that hadn't finished healing. She had been taken too, but her story wasn't in newspapers or archives. Her file had been hidden deeper, her name erased even more cleanly than his. On the 5th morning, Michael woke to an envelope under his door. No return address, just his name in handwriting he didn't recognize. Inside were 2 sheets of paper, one a brief legal summary from a Portland law firm, and the other a handwritten note that chilled him instantly. Mr. Granger, you are the sole beneficiary of Arthur Nolan's personal estate. Included are properties, assets, and private journals. Access is granted upon formal acceptance. Refusal will result in donation to the state. Michael stared at the note, then read it again. The man who had stolen him had left him an inheritance. He met with the firm 2 days later. Nolan's will, handwritten and validated, listed only 2 names, Michael and Maya. Each was granted full access to a series of encrypted files, 1 Oregon property, and financial assets totaling over $400,000. Michael didn't care about the money. What made his stomach turn were the journals. There were 12 of them, each labeled by year, each written by Nolan. Michael read the first one alone in a cafe, hands shaking as he turned the pages. Nolan had detailed everything: the agencies he created, the mothers he manipulated, the shelters he bribed. But one entry stood out, dated just weeks before Michael's abduction. The Grangers are desperate. I've offered them a child who will be forgotten in a month. The mother's weak. The boy will be safe with them. They'll believe what they want to believe. Everyone does. Michael stopped reading. He wanted to vomit. The Grangers hadn't rescued him. They had been complicit, whether they understood or not. They had walked into a transaction that depended on a woman being erased and a child being claimed like property. He didn't tell Maya right away. She was trying to rebuild slowly, piece by piece, but he couldn't hold it forever. When he finally told her, she didn't cry. She just sat still, staring at the wall for a long time before saying, "We weren't given families. We were traded into them." They spent the next week reading Nolan's records together. And in one file, they found a third name. A boy, born 1992. Mother listed as Evelyn Taylor. Unconfirmed, possibly still missing. Michael didn't sleep that night. The world had opened again, and now it was darker than before. The story you've just followed, the letter she left behind, is not about a crime. It's not about secrets or betrayal or even justice. It's about identity. About what happens when the story of your life, the one you've been told since childhood, turns out to be a carefully built lie, and about whether you can still love the people who built it for you. Michael Granger's journey started with 10 words written by a dying woman. 10 words that shattered 35 years of memory and forced him to question who he was, where he came from, and whether the love he grew up with could survive the truth. For many of us, that might sound like fiction, but for far too many people, it's not. The scars of undocumented adoptions, coerced surrenders, and fractured families still ripple through generations. In discovering his biological mother, Evelyn, and later his sister, Maya, Michael wasn't just finding people. He was recovering pieces of himself. He was reclaiming history that had been stolen from him, not just by Arthur Nolan, but by the silence of a system that allowed men like Nolan to operate in plain sight. What makes this story powerful isn't that it ends in justice. It doesn't. Nolan dies in prison. The money doesn't erase the trauma. Evelyn is gone. The truth came too late to save her, but not too late to change the future. The real resolution is in the choice Michael and Maya made together, to use what they've been given, truth, pain, inheritance, and memory, and turn it into something living, something that could help others. That is the soul of this story. That pain does not have to be the end. That the lies we inherit do not have to define us. That identity isn't fixed at birth or dictated by blood, but shaped by courage, truth, and the people we choose to become. If you followed this story to the end, thank you. You didn't just read a narrative. You walked alongside someone as they tore their life apart and tried to rebuild it with open eyes and an honest heart. That's not easy, and it's never clean, but that's what makes it real. I hope this story made you think. I hope it unsettled you in the right places. And more than anything, I hope it reminded you that behind every name, every file, and every statistic, there's a human life waiting to be heard. If you found meaning in this story, if it moved you or made you pause, I invite you to support this channel. Subscribe, share it with someone you trust, or simply leave a comment, not just for the algorithm, but so that stories like this keep getting told. Stories that don't pretend everything ends neatly. Stories that carry the weight they're meant to. Because in the end, it's not just about what the letter revealed. It's about what we do with the truth once we know it. Thank you for listening.